Hey, Brandon here with Flycraft, hanging out in my backyard. It's a beautiful day in Salt Lake City. We're gonna go over a few different rigging techniques, mostly focusing on streamers today. A lot of people, wonder about leader lengths, sink rates, that type of thing, maybe even rods that we use in the boat. Really, I think, as far as streamer fishing goes, you could use anything from like a 3 weight to a 10 weight, right? If we're talking trout, it's probably going to be most popular sizes are 5 through 8. There are some times when I'm fishing little streamers on small streams where I might throw a 3 weight or something like that. Typically for me out of the boat, I have a 6, 7, or 8, or quite often all 3. So right now I'm going to rig up a 6 weight. One thing I always start with when rigging up a streamer is I save my used leaders. Like we all, like when we're dry fly fishing, our leaders get to a certain point where they're just not really worth building out anymore. You're never going to get it back to like a nice tapered 9-foot 5X leader or whatever. So some people just trash them. I think those are perfect to save for either nymph fishing or streamer fishing, because really I'm not super concerned with taper. I like a nice heavy butt section that a dry fly leader has. It helps turn over flies. If you're nymphing, it helps give you an attachment point for a strike indicator. I like loop-to-loop connection from my leaders to my line. Some people don't, but what I like about using my old leaders is they have a heavier butt section for the loop, so it doesn't cut into your line and slice them as much. So if you ever slice the end of your loop off quick, it's usually because maybe you're attaching straight 0x or something to it, and it's thinner and it can rip your line. If you look through my boat boxes here, like I have millions of streamer or leader packets. I'm going to keep the ones that are worth saving and roll them back up and use them again. But once they get to a certain point, they usually end up in the back of the leader pack, and I use them for streamers or nymphs. So really anywhere from 2 to 4 feet of butt section from a used leader is perfect for a streamer rig. It will also work for a nymph rig. One thing you'll find is, this is like, I don't know, 30, 40 pound, whatever it is. There are certain species where you might use that heavy of a tippet to your fly, but you're probably going to taper it down. Now, I'm not trying to do like a beautiful dry fly taper because with streamers, you have enough weight on your streamer at the end of your leader to turn it over. What I'm trying to do is typically I'm getting down to like 0x. I would say anywhere from like 20 pound to 3x is your average trout tippet that you attach to your fly. I tend to go heavier, I believe, like unless it's a super small streamer, maybe I'm fishing like a leech on a lake. I don't think the heavier tippet, like fish see that streamer and they don't really care about how heavy the tippet is. They get so focused on that meal. If the fly is too small, you might want to go a little bit lighter on the tippet just so it presents it well. So basically, I could go from this butt section straight to the tippet I'm going to attach these flies to, which is probably going to be 12 pound or 0x. Sometimes though, attaching the 0x to a thicker tippet is a little bit tougher. So what I'm going to do is put 20 pound in between just to make my knots go easier. So basically on this line, or this rod, I'm going to set it up as a floating streamer line. We'll go over sink ones in a minute. But with float lines, I like a longer leader. Reason being that float line's going to keep your streamer from sinking to the depth that you want. The more thin leader and tippet material you have, the better your fly can get down, which is what a streamer sink line would do. But some rivers at certain flows or how small they are, a sink line's too much. Here in Utah, most of the time we're fishing float lines with longer leaders. And those longer leaders are going to depend on the stream, how fast they are. I would say they typically range 6 to 10 feet. What I'm going to do is, one thing is I'm about 6 feet tall, so you're going to see me measuring, using my wingspan as I'm tying knots to kind of monitor what the length of my leader is. So you know how tall you are, your wingspan's probably similar. So that's a good way to help you tie knots and figure out the length of your leader. So, right here, we're working, a little over 3 feet. I'm gonna attach some 20 pound. Now, my leader butt section is just mono, which is nylon, because I'm using them from old dry fly leaders. That's fine. If you really want to get fancy, you can get like fluoro. Sometimes, you know, you can just buy spools of this heavy butt section fluoro to attach to. I don't think for the butt section itself it really matters. But moving forward, I really like fluoro for streamers and nymphs. I mean, there are some properties to it where it refracts light less. I'm not as concerned about that. What I like is it's a little bit stronger and it sinks, where like mono does float. Hey, bud. Got a few dogs that are going to be walking through the shots from time to time. And, you know, some people don't like using fluoro. There are environmental concerns because it doesn't break down as fast. So if you prefer to use mono, feel free to use it. I think although it doesn't break down as fast as mono, you're less likely to lose it because it's stronger. Regular mono, as you're getting stuck on branches, fish's teeth are hitting it, it's going to get frayed and is going to break easier, where fluorocarbon doesn't. And like I said, it also sinks a lot faster. So if you're concerned with sink rate, that's going to help you out. So basically, I'm more of a surgeon's knot guy. Some people prefer blood knots. That's fine. I will say, from the knot attaching your tippet to your thick leader section, I would go surgeon. Surgeon is easier to attach a thicker and thinner line. Now, fluoro is more slippery than mono. Typically with fluoro, I always do a triple surgeon's knot. That being said, it's hard to cinch up a triple surgeon's knot cleanly when you're attaching a thin tippet to a thicker tippet. So for this one connection, I'm just going to do a double. Okay, so I got my double surgeon loops through. Now I'm going to start tightening it down. Bring it in, wet it. Snug it in as good as you can. A couple dogs barking. I think we got a visitor. So I like to cinch it up as good as I can with my hands and then tug on each tag with my teeth like this. Always give your knot a pull check. So I'm going to trim my tags. Always make sure you catch your tags that you're trimming because you don't want to, you know, lose them into the river or the ground. Okay, so once again, I'm going to check. Right now, I'm getting close to that 6 foot mark. So now I'm going to attach my flies. Once again, this is going to be a tandem streamer rig on a floating line. So I'm going to do some 0x. Pull the 0x out. Now I'm going to do a triple surgeons. Wet it, pull it tight. So now that I have the 0x on, if I was just doing a regular floating line setup for the streamer, I'd probably attach my streamer at this point. But I'm not going to quite yet because I'm going to attach another piece of tippet because I'm going to put my first streamer on a tag and my second streamer on tippet off of that. You don't need to. You can just do like what you're used to doing with like double dry or nymph rigs, where like you tie one streamer on here, tip it to the back of the other hook and extend that out. This does give it a lot more movement though. I always recommend your connection to your next fly being a slightly slimmer piece of tippet. That way, if your back fly gets caught, you can break it off without losing potentially both your flies. So I'm going to do 2x for this, which is still pretty darn strong. On this one, man, most of the time I tie this, I like don't do as long as I like. So I would say start longer than you think you need. I'm going to do about a good arm's length. Cut it off. Now, tag length is personal preference. I would say anywhere from like 3 to 8 inches is fine. The longer your tag, the more likely it might be to tangle, but also the more motion it gives it. Also, if you're swapping out flies, the longer your tag is, you have more room to trim it and tie more flies on. Okay, so we'll do a tag roughly, I don't know, 8 inches or so, because my first knot I'm going to tie with the streamer is going to eat into some of that too. Another triple surgeons, of course. I was trying to remember to trim the tag I'm not using now so I don't forget later. Not that the fish would really care. Okay, so I'm going to attach my first fly. I normally like if my flies are different sink rates, I normally like my first fly to be the heavier one. It just helps with casting, and it also helps with presentation. The first one's going to drop faster, and I'm a big fan of the streamer loop knot. Before we started calling it a streamer loop knot, it was known as a Rapala knot. You can use a standard fisherman clinch knot. We'll show you the streamer loop knot in a little bit here, but it's a lot stronger and it gives the fly more movement. All right, streamer loop knot. Quick break to pet a dog. Hey, pasta. All right, so once again, I'm going to use my wingspan trick to see. So my first fly is going to be on a tag about there. And then that looks about good. You know, I would say could be a little shorter, could be a little longer. That's personal preference. It also depends on the size river you're on. On bigger rivers or clearer water, I like a longer distance between the two. Also, typically when I'm doing a two-fly rig, if they're not the same size, I already talked about sink rate of them, but I'll also normally put the bigger one on. If you've ever been fishing and it's one of those days and you're just getting follow after follow, but the trout are not, or whatever species is not eating your fly, typically if you had a trailing fly on, that bigger fly will catch their attention and then they'll eat the trailing fly. So this tandem streamer rig with the tags is a trick I learned from fishing with Lance Egan. He's a big fan of it and it works. And he does it, like I said, on sink lines, streamer lines, that type of thing. Like I said, if this was going to be a streamer line setup, you'd have a much shorter leader, like we'll go over in a little bit, but your fly connection like this would be the same. I typically also like to play with different sizes and different colors, just because it gives you two flies. It's like nymphing. You know, you don't know exactly what they want, so you get to play around with different sizes and colors to see what really triggers the fish. A little tug to make sure it's good. So at this point, depending on the river you're on, these both have cone heads. This has a pretty little cone head on it. This one has a bigger one. On a lot of rivers, that might be all the weight you need. But if not, feel free to crimp split shot on it. And I normally do it right above the connection for the tag for the first streamer. On the other floating line setup, I'm going to show you for a single fly in a little bit. You'll see that split shot a little better. People are worried about putting split shot too close to flies. The fish don't care. Like, they're looking at that big streamer and they don't care if there's a chunk of split shot right in front of it. Basically, this is a tandem streamer rig. You can use whatever size flies you want, whatever length leader you really want. Those are my recommendations, and do it on a floating line or a sink line.